New polling from 6 important states in the next election shows voters there back the impeachment inquiry, but not so much removal from office. 50% of voters in Pennsylvania, Florida, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Arizona support the Democrats' impeachment inquiry, while 45% oppose the investigation. Only 43% of voters in those states support impeachment when coupled with removal. 53% oppose it. Nate Cohn of the New York Times points out, quote, the results suggest that the president continues to be stronger in the top battleground states than he is nationwide. This is keeping his narrow path to re-election alive and insulating him and his party from national political opinion to an extent. Here with us again tonight is Carolyn Ryan, assistant managing editor for the New York Times. Thank you for coming back.
Sure thing.
I asked this of all of our political guests. A, if I gave you construction paper, a map of the U.S. and crayons, could you find a path to re-election as of right now tonight for Donald Trump and the Electoral College, A, and B, what excites you or bores you about these new poll numbers?
Well, I mean, I think the poll is fascinating. Yes, I could find that path. But there's a lot of rich data in here, and I think you have to look at this as a continuum. People, even though there's not a majority, unlike in the Fox poll and other polls, for impeachment as in removal, there is movement toward both support for the inquiry and toward support for removal. So there's a very small sliver of people who are for an impeachment inquiry, meaning go investigate him, but they haven't yet decided Trump should be removed. Who are those people? They tend to be young. They tend to be low information voters. They're very cynical about politicians in general. They think this is how people in public office act, and they're not surprised by what Trump is doing. So if the Democrats want to convince that group of people, and I think they need to in those states, they have to show that this is atypical, aberrant, extreme misbehavior. It's not run-of-the-mill political misconduct. And that's the challenge that they have.
Bernie Sanders this weekend, New York City, on a beautiful afternoon, declared himself back, drew a crowd of 20+ thousand, drew an endorsement from AOC. What's it all convertible to out in the wider world, across America? Well,
the real question for Bernie Sanders right now, and this is what you hear from our reporters in the field, is there is excitement, you know there's passion, but the support is not growing. If you go to events in Iowa, it's sort of the same people who were there in 2016. What are the new cohorts that Bernie is going to attract? They're not emerging. So AOC is exciting, and she's exciting to young people. And let's not downplay the significance of both that crowd in that moment in terms of turning the page in his election after a very serious medical event. But the question is, especially in Iowa, can he reach out, can he organize, and can he bring new people to his movement?
What is Hillary Clinton up to? She put out a kind of a jokey, fake JFK letter that was, however, his real signature this weekend, take off on the president's correspondence with Erdogan of Turkey. She came out after Tulsi Gabbard.
Right.
She came out after Jill Stein, and you know something is up when the president then defends Jill Stein and Tulsi Gabbard. What do you think is going on here?
Look, every day she wakes up knowing she lost to Donald Trump. That's not an easy thing for her to carry. I think that's a very painful thing. I think it shapes her view of the world. I think the Russian interference shapes her view of the world. So I think it's not easy for her to kind of let go of the very raw feelings from that loss. And from a human level, you can understand why.
Also, she's on book tour, and people are asking her for comment wherever she goes.
Yeah, but I would say, I think that's exactly right. But she is freer now than, say, she was as a candidate. She was an extremely cautious candidate. And now the way that she talks about Tulsi Gabbard and sort of the jokey personality on Twitter is very different from what we saw when she was running for office.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.